Welcome to today's episode. This is Routes y Raíces, an immigration podcast. In today's episode, we are going to talk about a notice to appear. What exactly does it mean? Who gets a notice to appear? Who issues notices to appear? Let's talk about it. Let's just dive right into it. What is notice to appear? So notice to appear is a formal charging document issued by the government, Department of Homeland Security, to a person, a non-citizen. Abbreviated, it's known as an NTA, a notice to appear, NTA. An NTA formally starts the legal process to remove a non-citizen from the United States.
Where and how can I get one of these?
So what do you have to do? If you are an undocumented person, a non-citizen, right? You are crossing the United States without permission, without being inspected and admitted, you will get one. You can get an NTA. Actually, you can get one even if you are inspected and admitted.
Yeah, there's like three categories. One is that you are entering without lawful documentation.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is that you are present in the U.S. without lawful documentation. And the third is that you entered with documentation, but you've done something to violate the terms and conditions of that status that you entered in on. I also think it's important to note that you can get an NTA and be placed into removal proceedings if you are undocumented, but also if you are a permanent resident, you can still catch these NTA hands.
So you're not free from an NTA if you are a green card holder. You can catch one of these in NTAs.
So yeah, there are ways that permanent residents can lose their residency as well. I mean, there's a lot of things that can get you in trouble. So having a green card is nice, but it's not carte blanche, like I can do whatever I want. Crimes for sure are going to get you into problems, including domestic violence. That is like one of the ones it's got its own code. There's a statute specifically to DV, and then obviously a bunch of other crimes that can get you into trouble as well, that you can be deportable for, especially if it's committed within the first 5 years. But even after that, depending on what the crime is, you can still be deported. So keep that in mind. Another thing, we are going to do a separate episode about this, but voting. Permanent residents cannot vote. You need to be a citizen. Oh, well, somehow I got this voter registration thing in the mail when I went to the DMV, blah, blah, blah. It happens. That sometimes the DMV, for whatever reason, sends these things out. Make sure you get it corrected. You're not supposed to be registered to vote. You should not be voting. And I think, like, honestly, 99.9% of people know that and don't. So this is not like a major issue, but it is a major topic of discussion. And voting as a permanent resident or even as an undocumented person disqualifies you from literally like everything. So the risks are so high that like people just don't do it, but that is one thing that can obviously get you in trouble if you happen to be in that 0.1% that didn't know, that didn't get the memo. So heads up there. Travel outside the country if you've been outside the country as a permanent resident for more than a year. Surprise, you're not a resident anymore.
You're losing that green card.
So even just like not living here can get you into trouble. There are things that can put you into proceedings, and I've seen that happen where somebody left the country, especially like during COVID, and couldn't come back or whatever the case may have been, or got sick and were hospitalized and couldn't come back for a certain amount of time, and they come back. At a port of entry, as you're going through customs, you're probably going to be issued an NTA saying that, you are a permanent resident, but you have to fight it now. You have to show to us that you have maintained your resident status.
So who issues an NTA? Well, it's the Department of Homeland Security. What do they do? So basically, they are a federal agency that oversees other immigration agencies responsible for enforcement and services. Most non-citizens, not all, caveat, most encounter one of these agencies, whether it be at a port of entry or at an airport, right? Or through USCIS, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, also known as USCIS. They can issue NTAs as well as ICE. So ICE can issue NTAs as well. The USCIS can issue an NTA if a person, for example, files for a particular immigration benefit and they are denied. If that person does not have a lawful status, then they will be issued a notice to appear. What does this mean? It means that that person will now be placed in removal proceedings.
Correct. And I want to point out also, just for clarity's sake, being issued an NTA does not mean that you are deported or that you will be deported. It's just saying that we are putting you in the process of removal but you now have an opportunity to
defend yourself.
And fight that if you want to, depending on, again, whether you're eligible for not, but that's a different issue. So the NTA really just starts the removal process, but then it is still a process.
Again, it's a formal charging document. So the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, they are at port of entries, in the borders, and at airports. They can also issue NTAs. And then obviously ICE, which are the officers that you are seeing within the United States who can also issue NTAs. But the difference between the current state of immigration and previous administrations is that a USCIS officer wouldn't necessarily right away issue an NTA. Actually, they may have not even issued an NTA. Now, policy changes have taken effect, and now the officer at USCIS, is required to issue NTAs to those who do not qualify for an immigration benefit and they have no legal status to be in the United States. ICE, another agency, again, we have the Department of Homeland Security, who oversees these separate three branches. USCIS, I just explained, now we're going to ICE. They issue it to individuals found to be in violation of immigration laws within the interior of the United States. So the videos that you're watching right now, for example, Minnesota, are a combination of ICE and CBP, really, and local law enforcement, but that's a different issue for a different episode. But primarily it's ICE and CBP. And then obviously it's CBP, again, issues NTAs at the port of entries, talking about Mexico, we're talking about Canada, airports. So again, what is on an NTA? So when a person sees an NTA, you're going to see their name and the charges and grounds for removal. And then it's going to have the date and the time when the person has to present themselves before the EOIR, which is the Executive Office for Immigration Review, aka the court. But even though there is a date and time in that notice to appear, it's not always accurate. It can change. So if you do have an NTA, it's recommended to often look at the EOIR website, punch in your A number. Your A number would be listed on your NTA to make sure that you have an up-to-date date and time of your hearing. So what if you were served an NTA? What if you went through USCIS and you now have an NTA? What if you were stopped by ICE and you now have an NTA? Or you were at the port of entry and now you have an NTA? Well, you have to go to court. There's no way around it.
What happens if I don't go?
If you don't show up to court, you will automatically be ordered removed in absentia. Basically, you did not appear, you did not contest the charges, you are now going to be removed no matter what. There are exceptions to that absentia that you can potentially file for in court to try to remove that in absentia order. Again, different episode, different time. But if you don't show up, there are consequences and severe consequences for not showing up to court. You have to show up to court. So what is the EOIR? Again, I already mentioned it, but I will mention it again. It is the Executive Office for Immigration Review. So you have the Department of Justice, who oversees the EOIR, as well as the Board of Immigration Appeals. Two separate agencies. The EOIR handles the beginning of your cases, so from master hearings, calendar hearings, to your individual hearing, which, what is an individual hearing? It's where you get to present your case as to why you should not be deported, why the judge should grant your particular benefit that you are seeking. That's where you argue the merits of your case. If it gets denied, you can choose to appeal that case, and it would go before the Board of Immigration Appeals. So going back to NTAs, does the EOIR issue NTAs? No, they do not.
They just get them.
They just receive them. They receive it. So again, DHS oversees USCIS, CBP, and ICE. Those three agencies issue NTAs to individuals. That NTA goes over to the EOIR, and then the formal removal proceedings begin. I will have like a little, on our YouTube page, I'm going to have like a little diagram of what this looks like, because this can be a little confusing, especially those people who have been here for years have never had an NTA, and all of a sudden they have an NTA, and they're like, well, what is this about? And it's like, well, did you go through one of these? Did you encounter USCIS? Did you encounter CBP? Did you encounter ICE? Well, that's probably why you now have an NTA, even though you've been here for 20, 25, 30 years. And now you are in removal proceedings.
I actually want to add one more thing about NTAs and asylum in particular. There are a lot of people that came to the U.S. at a port of entry, presented themselves at the border, and were claiming asylum or fear of return from their country of origin. And what happens there is a lot of times the border officers or somebody within the agency will conduct a credible fear interview to see if they have enough to kind of work with there in terms of applying for asylum. And if they did, that person would be issued an NTA at the border, which gives them the right to seek asylum in front of a judge in the U.S. That's not a final decision. There are two groups of people that are confused about that. One, the applicant, the defendant. I've seen it happen a number of times where somebody will come in with an NTA and be like, oh, they gave me asylum. And I'm like, this is not asylum.
Yeah.
The NTA is not asylum.
Right.
The NTA says you have permission to apply for asylum. You can present a case and make your case that you are eligible for asylum, but it is not asylum itself. It is really just an opportunity to go to court and apply for what you think you may be eligible for.
And argue before a judge.
And you can still be denied. If you don't meet the criteria for asylum, you may still be denied and ordered removed, and that's a whole separate process. It's still, but in between, it's up in the air, whether that's yes or no. And then two, there are people in the public in general that don't understand that as well and think like, oh, well, Biden just gave all these people permissions and asylums and whatever the words are out there that people are using. That is not the case. These people were given a notice to appear, to go through, we're given due process. The law, international law, U.S. law says if somebody claims fear of return to their country, we have to give them an opportunity to seek that relief. So the NTA was just an opportunity to seek that relief. It does not mean that they have permission to stay here indefinitely. Now the problem is that the courts are so backlogged that they don't have time to get to these cases until years later. And that's why you have the work permit so that people can work, pay taxes, whatever in the meantime. That's not indefinite status. There is a finish line to that. There is an end date to that. But the problem isn't people going through the process. The problem is not having a system to accommodate the number of people. We need to do is have more judges, have more courts, have more people trained and qualified to deal with you so you can get through the cases quickly.
I think another thing that is important to differentiate too is, at least during the Biden administration, the people that came in through the CBP1 program, right?
Oh, yeah.
I can't even count them, my hands. I'd probably be rich if I got $1 every time I heard it. All these illegals that Biden let in. But in order to be illegal, you had to have not been inspected or admitted, right? These people came in through
a lawful channel.
So they're not illegal. They just don't have a status. That's different than people who may have gone through different ways. But in terms of the people who, quote unquote, Biden let in through that program, I mean, they technically do have a status, yet a temporary one. Like you
Correct.
said, not indefinite.
Like it's kind of an in-between until there's a final resolution because they just do not have the resources available at ports of entry. They don't have enough officers available or trained officers, much less, to handle these cases at a port of entry. But to automatically just deport everybody without giving them this opportunity, that is a denial of due process. So then we're stuck in this circle of, are we going to do due process or not?
And they're not illegal. They're not illegal.
They're not. I know people want to use that word and it's convenient for whatever reason. They like it. It makes them feel better about themselves if they can just call somebody illegal.
Yeah.
But it's inaccurate.
In terms of immigration cases, and I think it's good to know these numbers because that's you're coming across an issue of efficiency and staying true to the idea of what this country is about, and that's due process, right? And so currently, as of February 2026, there's 520 permanent immigration judges. It looks like 33 assistant chief immigration judges. So there's that. But how many immigration cases are currently pending before the EOIR? Well, there's a little over 3 million cases. So we have less than 700 judges handling a little over 3 million cases.
And those numbers are going to get worse when you have a policy that says you have to NTA or issue an NTA to somebody because you just didn't like on discretion their application for adjustment of status or a U visa or whatever it may be. So they're looking for excuses and ways to issue NTAs to people, which is putting them in the court process, which adds cases into the court backlog, and then complaining that you've got so many cases and way more cases than you can handle, and then pre-terminating them.
Right.
So where was the due process? What are we even doing?
Not to mention, like you just said, firing judges when there aren't enough judges to begin with.
Right.
Handling those cases.
Or possibly just filling those places with people who are partisans, right? Or aligned with certain politics and policies. But then is it really justice and fairness in that system? Or is it just kind of executing a certain political view when it comes to immigration? But then why do we even have this process if it's not going to be fair and impartial? Then just do the order of deportation and save me the fucking time, okay?
Yeah.
Like, don't run me around back and forth to court and we're just putting on this show for nothing.
Well, there are listeners who may come across this, what you just said, and say, yeah, let's do that. Let's just sign that order and deport them.
Sure, but then don't come at me talking about how you're a place of law and order.
Right.
Then don't say that we have rules that we need to follow, because how is it that only certain people are required to follow those laws and others are not? I mean, who makes those decisions of like who should be exempt from law and order? I know that's a rhetorical question because I have some answers for that, but some people that are very exempt from law and order.
Right.
But for people who don't have $1 billion,
which is most of us.
Which is
99% of us.
99% of us, we still have to have due process and a rule of law and abide by that. Otherwise, if the law does not apply to one of us, then it doesn't apply to any of us. And if the law does not defend one of us, then it does not defend and protect any of us.
Right.
So it either is there to protect and defend the least of us so that we can all benefit from those laws. Otherwise, there's really no point.
What do you say to people who are saying that the undocumented are not constitutionally protected, like those who are, American citizens born within the borders of this country?
That's an interesting question, but the Constitution, I don't think, specifies that. It is a constitutional right, regardless of whether you're here documented or undocumented or whatever. Those laws and rules apply to everybody equally, and we all have a right to due process, and that doesn't matter whether you're here undocumented or not. And if somebody is here undocumented and they have to be put it through the removal proceedings and whatnot, that's fine. We have a process for that. We have a system for that. But then follow that process and follow that system, right? Follow your own laws around that. And if you think there's a problem with that, the system is not functioning, which, spoiler alert, it's not.
It hasn't been.
It hasn't been. We've been saying for years that the immigration system is broken. It's extremely broken. But then look at what's broken and try to fix it instead of just being like, oh, these damn immigrants. The immigrants are not the problem. The problem is you got fucked up systems and you don't want to spend the time to think about that and fix it. Okay? That's the fucking problem.
And I think it's for me personally, I think it's worth noting that, if you committed a crime and you're convicted of a crime and you are now deportable, okay, fine. Especially if you committed a heinous crime. Like, fine, okay, that's the law.
Right.
But follow due process. You have to follow it.
And it can't be that hard. Like, if it's that bad following due process, you're still going to remove that person.
Right.
So I don't understand what the problem was with following due process. And honestly, there are certain crimes that are called aggravated felonies. There's a list of them. If you have been convicted of one of these offenses that falls under the aggravated felony list, you're SOL. Okay? You don't qualify for a defense from a deportation. Listen, you're gone. Okay?
Right.
But still, you have to go through the process, admit to the aggravated felony, be convicted for it, whatever the case may be, and have that process carried out properly versus, well, I just as an individual think that this is a disqualifier for you, and so I'm going to make this decision for you. No, you have to go through the process.
Right.
Like, that's the whole thing about the U.S. That's what makes this
Us
country different, and what makes it special is
Right.
because we have due process and we have these processes through which we carry out justice. And they work overall pretty well for most of the time. Obviously, they're not perfect. There are always issues, but for the most part, they're pretty good. There are countries that don't have due process, and we shit on them all the time because they don't.
Right.
So is that the club we're really trying to join?
I don't think so. I don't think so. In some, there are NTAs, notice to appears. They're issued by Department of Homeland Security agencies. You can get one if you are a green card holder. You can get one if you've been in the United States without a green card for 20, 30 years. You can get one. And there is a process that you have to go through to be able to remain in the United States, to defend yourself in remaining here. Anyway, we hope you learned a lot about NTAs, and for those of you who are listening and have an NTA, you got to go to court.
You definitely got to go to court. And for those of you who are listening and have questions, I'm sure there's plenty of you who have questions about this. Please send us your questions.
Comment on our YouTube page, and we will try to answer most of them by way of our podcast, I should say.
Yeah,
in a future episode.
Discuss
time permitting.
Questions and hopefully try to get some answers to you guys, or just answer some curiosities even. So
right.
We're happy to do it. Let us know.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, if you have an NTA and it has a court date on it, you should probably check it. And there's an EOIR website. If you Google EOIR, it'll take you to an automated case information system, and then you can just punch in your A number there and hopefully get an up-to-date date. So until then, until our next episode, God bless.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.